Welcome to the first vlog of 2023. Today I'm going to be kicking off a reading vlog where I'm going to be reading from 3 new thriller authors for the first time. These are going to be new to me thriller authors where I will just be discovering some new authors, trying them out, and seeing if I'm interested in picking up more books from them. I've always been interested in the concept of doing like an author taste test, but I personally know myself and how hard I can be on books, and I would hate to do a dedicated author taste test to reading like 3 books from one author, and then what if I don't like any of the books, and then I'm putting a video out there that has like the author's name in the title that they could find if they search for their name, and then it's just me saying that I don't like any of their books and I'm not going to read any of them again. So I really wanted to try this out in a way where I would be trying multiple different authors, so it's an author taste test, but I'm trying 3 new authors at a time. I'm sure I'm not the first person who has done this before either, but just explaining my framing for this video. So in today's video, I'm going to be reading 3 different books from 3 different authors that I have never read from before, and all of these are thriller books from what I know about them right now, but also sometimes I go into a book thinking it's a thriller and it's kind of a blend of horror or it's a bit more mystery, so I'm just framing it as thriller, but there could be different blends along the way. So for the books I'm going to be reading in this video, the first one I have is The Getaway by Lamar Giles. This is a book that I saw being advertised on Goodreads and the cover just sucked me in, and then I was in a Target one day and I saw it sitting on the shelves and I was like, I need to have that. I don't really need to know much about it. It looks very intriguing. And from what I understand, this is a YA thriller slash horror slash dystopian novel. I typically really like reading YA thrillers and YA horror books, but I didn't read as much of them in 2022, so I really want to try to reprioritize reading more of them in 2023, so I thought this would be a good one to throw in the mix. Next, I'm going to be reading an arc I have for this book called You Must Remember This by Kat Rosenfield. This is coming out on January 10th, so by the time you see this video, the book's probably going to be out. Oh wait. Wow, plot twist already. In the intro of the video, I was looking at this author's profile on Goodreads, and it turns out I have read from this author before. She wrote this book called Amelia Ann is Dead and Gone, which I read back in like 2012, but I don't remember it at all. So I could replace this with a different book, or we could just say I feel like I basically haven't read from this author before because that book was so long ago. Editing Ashley here to let you know I did decide not to read that book because it just didn't feel right. I wanted to read new to me authors, and a book came into my life right at the right time to read it. So instead I chose to pick up The House in the Pines by Anna Reyes, so you'll see me talking about that book instead of You Must Remember This. And then I'll also be reading an arc of The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz, which comes out on February 21st. This is actually this author's debut, so this is the first book that I'd have an opportunity of reading from them. When I first heard about this book, I actually thought it was Andrea Bartz because I'm so used to seeing that name in the thriller world, which I also don't think I've read anything from Andrea Bartz before, so that's another author I could include in the future. But this is a debut author, and this book sounds really intriguing. It's about these writers who go to this retreat to go focus on writing their books, and apparently it descends into a nightmare. So I'm really excited to check out all these books, read from all these authors, and see if I discover a new favorite along the way. First up, we're going to be getting started with The Getaway by Lamar Giles. Hello, it is very late at night. I'm getting ready to go to bed, but I did need to update you about The Getaway since I've made it through the first part of this book. I just got to the second part. I didn't even realize there were going to be parts, but I got to this page. It says closed for a private event, so that's moving into the next part of the story, and I feel like I'm about to learn a lot of things because it jumps to 3 years earlier in the story. So before I learn too much, I wanted to give you just my first impressions on the book this far in, which is about 116 pages into the story. So far, I'm very intrigued with what's going on in this book. It has a very interesting world setup. It is very dystopian. You're mainly following this guy named Jay who is working at this place called Karloff Country. And Karloff Country is basically like Disney World or Disneyland. There's even a reference of Walt Disney at one point and how the founder was very inspired by Walt Disney. And the whole rest of the world is dissolving into absolute chaos. It's like a 5 minutes in the future type story where climate change is affecting people, poverty is affecting people, there's meat shortages, water shortages, the air isn't clean, it's just like absolute chaos everywhere. But in Karloff Country, it is this oasis where you can go to escape the horrors of the real world, and some people are lucky or privileged enough to live in Karloff Country, and Jay is one of those people. He also has a friend group, a guy named Zeke, a girl named Connie, and a girl named Shell. And Shell is actually a daughter of one of the Karloffs, so she's like a big deal. And Jay has a crush on Shell, and then the whole inciting incident incident of what kicks the story off, which isn't the synopsis, so this is not a spoiler, is one of them ends up going missing in the middle of the night with their family. They have these plans for a presentation the next day, and then that one doesn't show up, and they go to their house and the house is completely empty, like no one was ever there, and they don't know what happened. So that's what's kicking the story off so far. And like I said, I'm getting ready to jump a little bit back in time to see, I think, when Jay was first coming into Karloff country, because he didn't always live here. He used to live out in the real world, and then he came into Karloff country somehow because I think his father got a job, but I don't know. I guess we're gonna learn more about that. But overall, I'm really intrigued with the setup of this. This is a really interesting concept. I like the atmosphere of it. It's moving very fast paced. I'm very interested to see what's going to happen next. No idea where the story is gonna go, but feeling hopeful. Time for a midway update on The Getaway. Actually, a little bit more than a midway update. I am currently at page 234, so I am really close to finishing the book and wanted to give one more update before I finished. It's also storming right now, so you're probably hearing the storm. Hope you enjoy the background ambience. This is really good. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really hooked into the story. I'm really interested in what's going to happen. It got a lot creepier than I was expecting it to get. It went in a direction I wasn't expecting it to go. I thought a lot of this book was going to be about trying to find the missing friend, but honestly that kind of falls off in the story a little bit, and it's more about the series of creepy things that are happening and how it's all building up to be this creepy thing, which I am really enjoying. I will say at one point I was like, wait, what about this missing person? Are we not going to worry about the missing person? But honestly, I'm cool with the direction the story's going and how it's making it be a part of this bigger thing. I think it's a really interesting social commentary. I think this would make a really good TV show. I love YA thrillers or YA horrors on TV shows. I feel like they work so good as series, and I feel like this would be such a good TV series. And this is also kind of reminding me of, I've only read one book from this author, but Tiffany D. Jackson's writing style. The only book I've read from Tiffany D. Jackson is The Weight of Blood, but I just feel some similarities in the writing style between them. And then I even noticed that on the back, the blurb at the top is from Tiffany D. Jackson, which I thought was really cool. And I'm just having a really good time with it. So this has been a very fun, positive experience. The only thing that I'm having a little bit of trouble with is the timeline of the story, which seems a little silly, but I'm just a little bit confused in some things because the book starts with this particular timeline that takes up a lot, and then you get this chapter that's at the start of a new part that goes 3 years earlier. And so I thought for the whole part of that story I was reading that it was all 3 years earlier, but I think after reading more that it's actually just that one chapter that was 3 years earlier, and it was just showing the friend group when they met. And that threw me off for a good portion of the book because it kept referencing things that had already happened, but I'm like, we're 3 years earlier. How did these things already happen? So that was more probably just a me problem. But I will say, like, the chapter titles and the switching of the POVs is a little bit unclear because you'll get chapters in the main character's perspective, Jay, and those are not labeled with Jay's name. It will just be labeled as like the start of a chapter, like chapter 3, and then you're reading from his perspective. But when you get other chapters, you're reading them from their name being at the top of that section, which makes it really clear that it's their perspectives. And then you got that 3 years earlier thing, and it just threw me off. But I don't know. I feel like it's not that complicated. I feel like I'm probably just overcomplicating it. But either way, I'm having a good time, and I am excited to finish it and see how I feel at the end. Hello, I have so much to catch you up on. First of all, I finished The Getaway. I do have the physical book, but it's in the other room, and I didn't feel like going to grab it, so picture on the screen. And overall, I did enjoy this book, and I had a good time with it. Looking at it overall, I do have more critiques or like nitpicky things about it, but just while I was in the book and while I was reading it, I was having a good time and I was interested in seeing what was going to happen next. So I do think it was an enjoyable experience. However, it wasn't like the perfect book for me. It is a YA book, so that also plays part into it, is I'm not the target audience for this book, which is fine. But I would say for me personally, I would end up rating this book about like a 3.5, not quite a 4, but almost a 4. My favorite things about this book is just the concept overall and how it portrays the horror throughout. I would say this is a book that is both a YA thriller and a YA horror book. Like, it perfectly blends thriller elements and horror elements and suspense elements and mystery elements. It's like a good mash of all of those things, but the horror is definitely present, especially in like a social commentary type of way. I think the idea of this book was really intriguing, and I think it was executed in a way to really evoke emotions out of you, and it was just horrifying. It also got darker than I was expecting, and sometimes more, I don't know if gory is the word, but there was just more dark things happening happening than I necessarily expected in a YA book, and I like that it went there. I think it's good to expose young adult audiences to these darker themes if they have an important message behind them, so I think that was done really well. And I guess my main complaints for the story of why it wasn't this 5-star perfect book for me have to do with the pacing of the story. It felt a little bit clunky to me at times. There was that whole part where I had no idea if I was reading 3 years before or during the present moment and how it all added up in the timeline, which could have just been a me thing, but also just generally the direction that the book takes is an unexpected one. I feel like based off of the synopsis, it really felt like we were going to spend more time exploring the mystery of this person who went missing, and that was going to be what really propels the novel forward, but instead you get other things that I think are interesting and that I think were compelling points for the story to take, but overall it just felt kind of like stretched out and compacted in a weird way. Like it almost felt like reading a trilogy that was smashed into one book, but still somehow the end perfectly sets it up for a sequel. I don't know. It was a really interesting experience. It kind of reminds me, this is like the craziest, weirdest, most out there comparison, but it kind of reminds me when I was reading A Court of Thorns and Roses for the first time by Sarah J Maas, and I had this expectation of what that story would be like because it sets up a trilogy, but instead it like expanded a lot more than I expected and still set itself up. So it's kind of one of those books that just like takes a lot of different paths that you weren't necessarily expecting, but it was still good in the end. I think the pacing was just a little bit weird to me. And then also because there were like 4 different kind of main characters, really like 3-ish main characters, and then the focus really being on Jay as the main character, I didn't feel like all the characters got the amount of time that I wanted or felt as well-rounded as I wanted them to be. There were characters I wanted to see more, I wanted to understand more about them, and I wish we would have been able to flesh them out a little bit more. And then finally there are all these media insertions throughout the book as well, which I thought was going to be interesting, but I didn't feel like they were fully utilized to add enough to the book. You'll get like newspaper clippings about this Karloff country place or just the whole business as a whole, any kind of articles about it, things about the TV shows that were coming out, and I felt like those could have really been utilized to add to the creep factor and make it more eerie and make you wonder what was going on behind closed doors. But really all I felt like it was showing was the outward facing like PR side of it, all of like everything's bright and sunny and fine, but didn't have that undertone that I felt like it could have to really show like the creepy things that were going on underneath. Maybe some of them did, but overall I didn't feel like they added a ton to the story. So yeah, I've got pros, I've got cons, kind of a balanced reading experience, but if I don't think about it, if I'm not trying to tear it apart, like I had fun with the story, I would recommend picking it up. And the point of all of this is to read new authors I've never read from before and decide, will I read from them again or maybe not? And for this author, I would say that I would definitely read from them again. Next up, I'm going to be reading The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. Hello, still here. I've actually already started the book, so I can tell you about it right now. I've been reading this one on ebook since I have an e-arc of it through NetGalley, and I got about 20% through the story last night when I was first starting it, and I have some initial thoughts. So the setup of this story is you're following this woman named Alex, who is a writer, and she is 30 years old, which is important. And there's this opportunity for this author she really admires, who is doing this kind of contest where 4 women in their 20s who are writers can submit their stories and be selected, and the 4 winners get to come out to this writing retreat that this author is going to host for a month, and it's going to be this really cool exclusive thing. She's aged out of it though, since she is now 30, so it's not going to be an opportunity for her anymore, but somehow she ends up getting pulled into it and getting the opportunity to be able to go, which is at first really exciting, but becomes slightly less exciting when she realizes another woman who's getting the opportunity to go is her ex-best friend, who she has had some kind of big falling out with. You don't know the full details about it, but these 2 women used to be absolute best friends, and now they are absolute enemies. I'm not sure exactly how much the synopsis discloses, so I won't give too much information away, but when they go to this writing retreat, things are a little weird. The stakes are really high in a way that they weren't expecting them to be, so it's like a very intensive writing workshop, and the place that they're staying has all this history around it that is potentially haunted or witchy, and there's some mystery behind what has happened there. So that's kind of the basic setup of the story. That is what I've gotten so far. I will say I am intrigued. I feel like it's reading pretty quickly. I'm not fully immersed in the writing style of it, which I think is sometimes an experience that I have when I read an ebook instead of the physical book, which doesn't seem like it would make that much of a difference, but sometimes it does for me. So I usually try to wait when I'm judging that when I'm reading an ebook to know if it's the writing style or if it's the writing medium that is holding me back from being fully immersed in the story. So I'm gonna give it a little while longer before I make any kind of conclusions about how I think the writing style is and if I'm fully in the story. But so far I think it's an intriguing setup. I love an isolated setting. It sounds like there's gonna be snow and they're gonna get stormed in there probably, which would be a lot of fun. I really like how high the stakes are for the writing retreat. That adds a nice intensity level to the story. And I have absolutely no idea what direction we're going. This is what I love about reading arcs, is I have heard no one talk about this, so I have no bias to think like it's gonna have a really disappointing ending or a crazy ending or it's gonna be supernatural. I don't know. This story could go in any direction, so I'm excited to see where it goes next. I'm gonna keep reading and I'll update you when I'm about the midway point of the story. Hello, I just got done doing some members only reading sprints. These were my first reading sprints that I've done with my members, which was so much fun. I did not set it up totally correctly, so I had a little bit of technical difficulties, but that's what happens when you learn something for the first time. But anyways, that was a lot of fun. And if you missed it, I have a membership now where we do fun things like reading sprints, and that link's down below if you want to join. But anyways, I was reading the writing retreat during those sprints and I got really far into it. I got to 65%, I believe is where I finished. And I do think I'm gonna finish it tonight because I am hooked in this book. I'm loving it, I'm having so much fun, and I need to know what's gonna happen in the end. This book's just gotten a lot darker than I expected, a lot creepier. It's very gothic and kind of haunted vibes. There's definitely the energy of not knowing who you can trust and really not feeling like you can trust anyone, which is my favorite. I love when strangers come together and, you know, you're just unsuspecting at first because you give everyone the benefit of the doubt and then you start to learn things and you don't know if you can believe if people are who they say they are, and it is just a lot of fun to try to untangle that. So I'm having a lot of fun with it, but I'm kind of nervous because I feel like it's opened so many different paths. The story could go so many different ways and it could lean so many different directions, and I have no idea which way it's going to go, and I don't know what I would prefer. I just hope that it's going to be satisfying to me at the end of it. I think even if it's not, I can still say I had a really fun time with this book because it just like is effortless to read. On the reading sprints, every time the timer would go off, I was like shocked because I couldn't believe it had been 30 minutes. I was just so immersed in the story and I just wanted to keep reading, and that doesn't happen all the time. So that's been really fun experience. I was also talking about this with my members on the reading sprints, but I feel like with these books I'm reading, I just keep having this experience of being like, I have no idea what direction the story is going to take. And my first instinct is to feel like the book is directionless because of that. I'm like, this isn't setting up a direction. I don't know which direction it's going. That's how I feel with this. That's how I felt with The Getaway, where I just don't know like what to expect. And my first inclination is like to blame the book for being directionless, but I don't think it's that. I think it's more like a side effect of me reading new authors for the first time, and I'm realizing I have no expectations. I have no bias. I have no preconceived notions. I don't have anything to gauge of knowing like, is this going to be supernatural because this author tends to write supernatural twists? Is this going to be really disappointing at the end because this author tends to write really disappointing endings? I don't know, because this is my first experience with all these authors. So I'm really enjoying that experience of it, just going into uncharted waters, not knowing what to expect, and just being really surprised along the way. I feel like that's made the reading experience for all of these books a lot more fun, and it's making me really enthusiastic about doing more of these in the future and letting this kick off a series of reading horror authors, reading YA authors, reading backlist books, reading literally like I've never even heard of this author before, and go finding books on a bookshelf and just pulling things out. So I feel like this is a win for me. I feel like this is going great. I'm loving it. I'm having so much fun, and I really cannot wait to finish the writing retreat. I'm going to finish that up tonight, and then I will let you know how I feel about it in the end. So I finished the writing retreat, and this was a 5-star read. I'm so excited to have a 5-star read in this video. It's so fun. I absolutely loved it. It was over the top. It was ridiculous. It was dark. It was edgy. It went there. It was so fun. It was so good, and I love that I had no idea what to expect with this author, with this book. I've heard nothing about it, and oh my gosh, I loved it. It was so fun. I don't think it was the perfect book by any means. Like, there's definitely things about it that I didn't love fully, but I just had such a fun ride with it. It just kept getting darker. It kept taking me by surprise. I kept wanting to know what was going to happen next. I flew through the book. I loved how dark it got. It's just so ridiculous. Like, this falls in line so much with just the ridiculous over the top types of stories that I love. It was so fun. I will say the very ending, like the epilogue, the last 5 pages of the story, I wish it would have gone out with a bigger bang. I feel like it could have really taken a risk with the ending, and it took a safe ending. And with just the over the top nature of the book, I really wanted it to take some kind of crazy risk with the ending, but I guess it was taking so many risks before that the author felt like we gotta close this off on a safe note. But yeah, I overall really enjoyed this one, had a lot of fun with it. I will definitely be reading from this author again. I will definitely be looking out for more works from them. This book isn't even out yet, and this is their debut, so it's gonna be at least a year before I get to read something from them again. And I just wish they have more out right now because this was so fun. This would also be such a fun one to talk about for book club discussions or buddy reads. So if you are the type of person who either has a book club and you're looking for a book club pick, or if you are someone who likes to buddy read with your friends, I think this one would be a fun choice for that. It would be such a fun one to like make predictions as you're going into what's going to happen, and then it just is so different from a lot of other thrillers that I'm reading right now. So I think it'd be a lot of fun. I'll also say there's definitely, I don't know if a plot hole is what I would call it, but there is a very simple explanation of something that could have happened to where all the ridiculous things didn't need to happen. But this is not the type of book where you need to think like that. Don't think critically about it. Just go in and have a fun time and be okay with the ridiculous over-the-top nature of it. I just want to know what author this author had in mind when they were writing this book, because I know they had to have someone in mind that they were thinking of. Oh my goodness. I just want to know everything. It was so fun. I promise I wear things other than this green sweatshirt. I've just been wearing it a lot this week, and these clips are kind of like coming over each other in a weird way because I'm reading books at the same time. But here I am to tell you about The House in the Pines, which I just started. This was actually a unplanned book to read in this vlog. I initially was going to read You Must Remember This by Kat Rosenfield, but then I found out that I've actually read from that author before, so that just didn't feel right. Even though I can't remember the book that I read from her before at all because I read it in like 2012 or something, I wanted this to be actually brand new authors to me. And The House in the Pines was one of Libro FM's ALC offerings for this month, which is advanced listening copies for audiobooks. This book is also the Reese Witherspoon book club pick, which I did not know until I was looking into it yesterday. So it felt like a good one to read. It's an author that I've never heard of. I'm pretty sure this is a debut novel. It's a thriller. It's a Reese pick. It's gonna be popular. Libro already gave me the ALC, so this is what we're reading. It has a really intriguing synopsis. The idea behind this one is you're following this woman whose friend died when she was a teenager, I believe. And the cause behind that death was always very mysterious to her. And it's all coming back to light for her now because one day she's watching YouTube and she sees this video of this woman sitting with this man at a restaurant, and then the woman is like staring off and then drops dead right there in front of him. And that man that she is sitting across is the same man that her friend was last with before her friend died. So she thinks there may be some connection there, and she decides that she wants to go pursue that, go back to her hometown, try to see what the connection is, and piece all that together. It turns out that man is also her ex-boyfriend. She had a relationship with him as well, and he found her at a very vulnerable moment in her life while she was suffering with an addiction to Klonopin, which I believe is an anxiety medication, or at least can be used for anxiety. And she was grieving the loss of her friend, grieving the loss of a family member, addicted to these drugs, and he came into her life. And she can't remember everything about that either, so there's some missing pieces to fill in. And then there's also another layer to the story where she's exploring more about her family history. Her father was writing a book, and then he died before he could complete it, and somehow that is also coming into the story. So there's a lot of different pieces here that are all fitting together into this bigger puzzle of her life. I'm really liking it so far. I am 33% of the way through the audiobook. I love the audiobook narrator. I love the writing of this story. I feel like it's developing atmosphere so well. I think part of that too is the audiobook experience and the narrator doing such a great job bringing it to life. I feel very soaked into this story. I will say it is a little bit tricky to follow when I'm in the past or the present because it kind of jumps around pretty seamlessly, but that also makes it feel more like how memories work, how sometimes you're in the past and sometimes you're in the present. And so it feels a little bit more ethereal with the way it's weaving together the past and the present, but it also is a little bit tricky to follow at times because I have to reset my brain like, okay, this is where we're at. Now this is where we're at. So it's a little bit to follow on the audiobook, but I think it's going fine. I'm just in for the ride, and I'm excited to see how all these puzzle pieces pieces come together. So once I know more, I'll let you know more about how I'm feeling about the book. Hello, welcome to my bedroom. I don't think you've ever seen this bedroom before. You've seen previous bedrooms of mine, but not this bedroom in this new house. So welcome. I needed a more quiet place to talk right now because my partner was playing video games in his office, which is adjacent to my office, and it was just gonna be a little bit loud. So I came in here because I wanted to tell you about The House in the Pines. I finished this one today. It was such a quick read. I got through this whole thing in just the 2 sittings. The initial sitting when I was first listening to it, and then the rest I just listened to, I guess it was like 70% of the story all at once as well. I just really enjoyed the audiobook experience of this one. I feel like I just got sucked into it and just wanted to know what was going to happen. I might have had a different experience if I was reading it physically because it is a slower paced story. It's more of a slow burn mystery suspense that takes a lot of time with a lot of flashbacks and building up a lot of context to bring you into what's going on. And it's more a story of discovery of understanding the past versus things taking a lot of time in the present and a lot of twists and turns in that way, so it's a lot more reflective. So I think the audiobook really worked for me, just keeping me like really engaged with the story. And overall, I did really enjoy it. I thought it had a really interesting concept that I was exploring. I don't think it was necessarily the most surprising book the whole time. Once you kind of figure out what's going on, there's not a big, huge shock moment in my opinion, but it is a interesting concept. It's not something I've read about a ton. I have seen it done before in a couple different ways, but it was a cool element to explore in a mystery thriller book, and I thought it contributed to the story and tied it all together really well. I think overall this is probably between like a 3.5 to a 4 star for me. I really enjoyed the writing style. I got really immersed in the story. I thought it had good atmosphere. I didn't feel particularly passionate towards the characters, but I liked them enough to be engaged and to care about what was happening to them in the story. And overall it was a good time. It was a good quick listen. I will say there were a lot of things going on in the story, and I'm still sitting on trying to really understand how it all pieces together, particularly the part of the story where she is exploring the book that her father was writing before he died. I'm not sure I fully understand how that ties into the whole story, and I don't know if that is a me problem because I was listening to it on audiobook really fast and I need to sit with it longer and think about it more, or if it was just like not super clear at the end of the story. So I don't know, I'm still like sitting on trying to figure out some of that. And like I said, it wasn't overly surprising, shocking, jaw-dropping twist, action-packed thriller. That's not what the book was. So I can't like rate against it for that because that's not what it was trying to be. But I don't know, that is always what I like to see in mystery thrillers, is to have a good mix of digging into a mystery and getting some interesting action going on in the present. And I do think this book had the potential for that. I think it just should have leaned into that a little bit more to make it a little more exciting, because it spends so much time in the past. By the time you figure out what's going on, it's like boom, that's the end. And I felt like we could have gotten a little bit more conflict before all of that was resolved. But yeah, overall I did really enjoy it. I really enjoyed the author's writing style, and I would definitely pick up another book from them in the future. So again, another great win. So that is it. That's a wrap on this video. That concludes reading 3 new to me thriller authors for the first time. We had Lamar Giles with The Getaway, which was a success. Definitely an author I will be reading from again. Ana Reyes, again, another success. Had a lot of fun with this one. Definitely an author I would read from again. And Julia Bartz, a huge success. Definitely an author I would read from again. So I found 3 new thriller authors to have on my radar. 2 of them are debut authors, which is even more fun to get to support someone right at the beginning of their writing career. And now I'm just going to be so excited to see what they do next. And with Lamar Giles, I have a backlist I can explore of his, which is also really fun. And I just did not imagine this video going this well. I did not imagine having such a fun time, but I'm very glad that I did. And I hope you had fun watching as well. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books. Let me know if I convinced you to pick up any of these books. And let me know if you have any ideas or recommendations for ways to continue this series. If I should go for reading new horror authors or specific types of authors or tropes, or any ideas that you have, leave those down below. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.